Right then, so let's start. I will start sharing the PowerPoint. Right then, hopefully everyone can see that, and please let me know if you can't see that. So this is the first in a course of self-healing, and the organisation, the non-profit organisation is AYA, which stands for Awaken Your Awareness, and through this course we'll explain exactly what that means. Awaken Your Awareness, actually, probably by the end of this lesson, hopefully you'll know exactly what that means. But yeah, AYA is a non-profit organisation, and we teach and deliver all types of natural healing and lots of other stuff. Got lots of projects going on, but this course is not about the AYA organisation, obviously. So if you're interested in the AYA organisation, that's a separate discussion. But this course is a course of self-healing, the AYA Healing Pyramid, it's called. And I'm Julian. If you're new here today, my name's Julian. And Veronica is the course administrator for this course. So, our logo, first of all, our logo is the blue butterfly. The blue butterfly is a symbol. It's a symbol of transformation. The butterfly is a symbol of transformation, and going on a self-healing journey is, we think, a type of transformation. And we think that everybody should be going on a self-healing journey. This isn't just for people who want to fix something. A self-healing journey is for everybody. And we'll explain exactly what self-healing means in just a second. So the blue butterfly is a symbol of transformation, and going on a journey of self-healing is a type of transformation. And the electric blue color, the deep electric blue color, that is also a symbol. It's the frequency or the color of unconditional love. And unconditional love is one of our highest values at AYA. So that's our logo. So this course is the AYA Healing Pyramid course. So just a few things to discuss before we start the actual course. So I've introduced ourselves, obviously. The timings for the course, that's important to mention. The course is spread over 7 months, and it's one lesson a month, and it's on Saturday mornings like this, and each lesson is approximately 2 to 2.5 hours. So we start at 10, and we try and get finished by 12. Sometimes it rolls on to 12:30, depending on how much interesting discussion we've had, basically. Now, it's once a month for a reason. It's not it is a short course, so it's only 7 lessons. But we do it once a month, and we do it over a period of 7 months because the self-healing techniques that we teach as part of the course take time to learn, and they take time to take effect. So, if we did it in 7 days, it'd just be too much information, too many self-healing techniques. People wouldn't have time to really integrate the techniques into their daily routines. So that's why it's 1 lesson a month, and we hope that you go away and practice the self-healing techniques that we're teaching. And we try and teach, approximately 1 per lesson or so. Okay, questions and discussions. So there will be a PowerPoint like this through the lesson, and then hopefully a bit of time. There's usually a bit of time to have a discussion at the end of the course. There will be a guided meditation at the end of every lesson as well. However, please do feel free to ask questions and throughout the course. If I'm not explaining something very well, if it's it just needs a little bit more detail in a particular area, or if you have a related question, please do ask as we go along. And feel free to interrupt me, and we can even lead to a small discussion during the lesson as well. But there will be, if you prefer, you can save your questions to the end. There will be a time for discussions at the end as well. Okay, there are course notes for this course as well. So there is a PowerPoint which I upload to Google Classroom. Google Classroom is our online learning platform, and there are also course notes for every lesson, which I also upload to Google Classroom. Now, we'll talk a bit more about Google Classroom at the end of this lesson, so I'll introduce you to Google Classroom, and if anyone's not on Google Classroom, we'll get you an invite and we'll get you onto Google Classroom. It's an online learning platform that you log on. There's a chat group in there. We can just have discussions throughout the month, answer questions, share experiences, etc. And the last thing is video. We're going to start videoing these lessons because there are some people who are joining the course who are in different parts of the world. So it has to be it has to be fully online distance learning now. So we're going to video these lessons. However, if you don't like being videoed, don't worry, because I'm not videoing you at all. I'm only videoing this way, and it's not picking up any audio from anyone as well. So it's just picking up what's coming out of what's going into this microphone. So it won't pick up any questions that anybody has or any discussion or anything like that. So if you don't like being videos, don't worry. You're not actually being videoed. It's just me. Okay. Any questions? All right, let's crack on then. So, self-healing, the Aya healing pyramid. Now we'll go through these layers in a sec, so don't worry too much about that. But I will go through the list of lessons just so you're aware. So on the left, you've got the list of lessons, 1 to 7. The Aya healing pyramid, which is today. Now the Aya healing pyramid is just an overview of the concept of self-healing, an overview of the layers of the pyramids to give you a broad description of what we're talking about when we're talking about self-healing. And then each lesson after that is a full lesson on each layer of the pyramid. The material body layer, the bioenergy layer, the emotional layer, the psychological layer, the spiritual layer. And the 7th lesson is the silent revolution, which I won't talk about now, but that is the concept of what self-healing can do on a collective level. Okay, on the right, you've got some assignments, but don't worry about that now. We haven't implemented that yet. We're still working on the assignments for this course. So when you finish this course, you'll get a certificate. You'll get an attendance certificate, and at some point in the future, when we bring those assignments in, we'll actually call it a qualification. But anyway, don't worry too much about the assignments for now. So most lessons, we like to start with a self-healing technique. So this will be the first self-healing technique. And this is a breathing exercise. Before I go into explaining the Aya healing pyramid and what it is, let's just do a breathing exercise. So this is basic yogic breathing. Now, I'll explain a little bit about what it is. Then I'll just do a demonstration, and then hopefully you guys can give it a go. Now, I know that many of you have been on the course previously already, so you know what you're doing, but there are some new people here today, so I'm going to go through it in detail. Now, basic yogic breathing is one of the most basic breathing exercises in pranayama yoga. Now, pranayama yoga is the yogic science of breath, and it's been around for thousands of years, and the benefit of breathing exercises has obviously been known for a very, very long time. So basic yogic breathing is a deep breathing exercise which has a rhythm and a bit of counting, and there's a bit of technique to get right. Now, it is basic because it's easy to do, but it's actually a very powerful technique. So as part of this course, we've chosen a group of self-healing exercises that are the simplest, but also the most powerful or the most efficient for their simplicity. And basic yogic breathing is a perfect example. But it's where we start. It's where we always start. It's the starting point for all breathing exercises, really. So let me explain. So I'll go through the technique. There's a bit of technique, and then there's a bit of counting to do. So for the technique, on the in-breath, so remember, this is just a deep breathing rhythm. So on the in-breath, it's important to get the type of breathing correct. So on the in-breath, you want to stick your belly out. The belly comes out on the in-breath. That's why it's sometimes called belly breathing. Now, at this point, your lungs are only half full. Now the chest comes out. And now your lungs are about 90% full. Because I can still talk, can't I? Well, actually, there's a little bit more that you can squeeze in. So right up to the top of the breath. The idea is to cram as much air into your lungs as possible. It's very, very good for lung health, but it's also good for the energy body. And we'll talk about the energy body a bit later on in this lesson. So belly comes out first, then chest comes out, then all the way to the top. Right, on the top of the breath, you want to hold your breath just for a very short time, count of 2 or 3, something like that. And then on the out breath, just let it out in a long, slow, steady stream all the way out to the bottom of the breath. And then at the bottom of the breath, another breath hold, count of 2 or 3 or so, not too long. And then repeat. So that is the technique. The counting, so you're counting On the in-breath, for the count of about 4 or 5, then you're holding for 2 or 3, and then out for the count of 4 or 5 again, and then holding for 2 or 3. And then you repeat, basically. So I'll do a couple of breaths to demonstrate. There we go. Easy. So with the counting, though, everyone has different size lungs. So if somebody has small lungs, a small person, then it may be just a count of sort of 3 or 4. But there's and it doesn't have to be seconds or anything like that. Sometimes you can count seconds. Sometimes you can count your heartbeats. It doesn't really matter. The point of the counting is just to make it use your full lung capacity. So from from your lungs at the most empty possible, all the way through to the fullest that you can. Whatever count is necessary for that to happen, basically. All right, has anyone got any questions before we give it a go? Okay, excellent. Well, you give that a go, and I'll tell you when to stop. So we're only going to do sort of 7 to 10 breaths or so, but I'll count the breaths. You just keep going with that rhythm, and I'll let you know when to stop, okay? And by the way, if you don't want to give this a go, you don't have to, of course. It's completely up to you, but I would encourage you to give it a go, of course. All right, then, go for it. And you can do it with your eyes closed or open, doesn't really matter. Oh, another couple of things. Try and keep a vertical spine for this one, and try and use your nose if you can. It doesn't matter if you use a bit of mouth breathing, it's not a problem, but try and use your nose if you possibly can. All right, go for it. I'll let you know when to stop. Okay, that'll do for now, I think. Okay, has anybody got any questions or comments about that? Or how did that go? You love the breathing out, but you don't like the breathing in. Excellent. What you might find is actually when you get quite practiced at this, you can actually start to experiment with the breath hold at the top of the breath, because that actually it starts to download more and more energy, but only when you get practiced at it. And it actually feels very good when you're downloading that energy, and it can actually feel a bit blissful as well. Right, there's a few things I need to say about breath work as well when you're starting out breath work. First of all, that particular exercise, there's 3 applications to that exercise. The first one is you can use it for a very short period of time, and you can use it throughout the day. If you're locked in an emotional reaction or something like that, you can actually use it to recenter yourself. You can say it's part of the emotional emergency toolkit. And if you're having an emotional reaction like frustration or something, or anxiety, and you want to get out of it, you can actually use that breath work and just do it for, you can just do it for 30 seconds or a minute or something like that. And it can actually calm you down, it can recenter you, and get rid of the emotional reaction. That's one. The second one is if you do it a little bit longer, let's say 5 minutes approximately, you might actually start feeling a little bit sleepy. It might get you a little bit snoozy. And that one that we just did was probably maybe 3 or 4 minutes or something like that. And you may feel that now. You may feel like you want to lie down and go to sleep maybe. Now, if you do it if you do that just before going to bed, that's quite a good one for getting to sleep if you have any trouble going to sleep. But be careful, because the third application is if you do it for a little bit longer, or let's say quite a lot longer, let's say 10 minutes, actually that is going to really energize you. That is going to give you a lot of energy. You're going to download a lot of energy, and you definitely won't be able to get to sleep if you do too much of it. But you can use that in the morning if you like, because that sets you up for the day lovely, doesn't it? Gives you a load of energy, gives you a boost to start the day. So there's 3 practical applications there. But you have to find those timings. You have to kind of experiment yourself. Everyone's slightly differently. So you just experiment with different timings and see how it makes you feel. Right. Another couple of very important things if you're starting out breath work. If you've never done breath work before, 2 very important things to mention. One is that if you do too much of it all at once, suddenly you might feel dizzy. Now that's perfectly normal. It's an influx of oxygen into the system, and you might just suddenly go a little bit dizzy. Now, if that happens, just stop for a while. It will go away very quickly, and eventually, the more practice that you get with breath work, that won't happen at all. You just get used to it. So that's one thing. It's not a problem if you get a little bit dizzy. The second thing is very interesting, and it is the fact that it's common to actually feel an emotional flush sometimes when you're doing breath work. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, it's not uncommon to shed a tear or two. You can actually get emotional. Now, you can do it, that can happen while you're doing breath work sometimes, but often it can happen during the day as well. If you're doing regular breath work, it can happen at other times in the day. And that's actually a good thing when that happens, because it is a release. It's a release of energy, and it's actually a release of emotional energy. And that emotional energy is coming from our emotions. Now, these emotions get trapped in the body, and we're going to talk about that in a minute when we talk about the healing pyramid. But these emotional memories, which relate to past memories, past traumas, get stuck in the energy body. And as you do breath work, they get released. And sometimes you can get an emotional tinge of the emotion that actually caused the blockage in the first place. So that can happen, and it's a good thing if it does happen. It can also trigger some thought patterns as well, which relate to those memories. So that's normal if that happens as well. And it's okay if that happens. It's like you're purging it from your system, from your memory banks. However, if there is serious trauma, we should always say this really, if there is serious trauma in somebody, then you just have to be very careful, because it can release a flood of memories that maybe and is not ready to be released. It just has to be released in a controlled manner. So if there's any serious trauma there, just be gentle about it, be careful about it, and take it easy, I would say. But for the most part, we're just talking about the normal emotional memories and trauma that everybody goes through in their lives. It's that baggage, it's that emotional baggage that we all carry around with us. And that gets trapped in the energy body as blockages, and breath work basically releases all that stuff that we've been carrying around. It makes us lighter, in fact. That's why breath work is so good. All right. Any questions so far before I move on? Yep. Hello? Yeah, there's loads of studies. There's loads of studies, and there's loads of papers, and there's loads of evidence for these types of techniques. However, the evidence that is there is it's not hard empirical evidence because it's all subjective. So because they don't fully understand how it works yet, I mean that they are starting to find scientific reasons of why breath work is good for you, but it's still it's still sort of fringe, and it's still hazy. They're not 100% sure yet, which means that they don't know the full mechanisms of how it works, which means that the research involved tends to be subjective questionnaires, asking people how they feel, things like that. So there is loads of evidence to show that it has a beneficial impact on people, but less empirical type evidence which shows definitively this is what it does in the body. But having said that, we have a research department at Aya, and that is one thing that we want to get into. We're just starting it now, in fact. So we're actually starting to run some research projects that we're going to run our own projects on finding evidence and understanding how these things affect our body in anatomy and physiology. Well, okay, so first of all, yeah, there are hundreds and hundreds of different breathing exercises, and pranayama yoga is an ancient science which you could spend a whole lifetime studying, to be honest with you. So there's tons of stuff, and there's different other sections of yoga, like Kriya Yoga, which have other types of breathing exercises as well. So now with globalization and the internet, there is all sorts of stuff on the internet, and you can find hundreds and hundreds of different breathing exercises, and people make new stuff up every day as well. So there's loads of stuff going on out there. So yes, that basic yogic breathing we're calling it basic yogic breathing because it's pretty much the most basic breathing rhythm, deep breathing rhythm that you can do, really. And you can get more and more complex with breathing exercises. You can do alternate nose breathing and all sorts of different things. And then you can add visualizations on top of the breathing, which is our next breathing exercise. We add the golden energy part, and that's a visualization, so that makes it more complex. So yeah, there's loads of more complex breathing exercises. Yeah. So what's happening there is that when you breathe in, your lungs are expanding, air's coming into your lungs, of course, but it's in the energy body which is having an even bigger impact. The energy body, which we'll talk about in a minute. The chakras are also breathing because the chakras are part of the breathing cycle. So when you breathe in, your chakras are actually spinning like mad, sucking in golden energy from the outside. And when you breathe out, you're also firing it back out again. So you're exhaling energy at the same time. So it's all about energy flow in the body. So the reason why breathing exercises feel good is because we go about our day feeling emotions all day long. And those emotions create emotional energy, which fly around our energy body. We're going to talk about this in a minute, don't worry, in the bioenergy layer. But so our energy body tends to be full of the emotional energy we've been feeling through the day. Now, if it's overwhelmingly negative emotions we've been feeling, like anxiety, for example, or anger, or whatever, now our energy body is full of that emotional energy. So when we do breathing exercises, it's a bit like an oil change for a car. You're blowing out all of that negative emotional energy, and you're sucking in brand new, fresh golden energy, basically. So you actually feel better because that emotional energy is what actually triggers our emotions. But we'll talk about that later on. And at the top of the breath, the reason why that feels really good is because that downloads the most amount of energy. So when you do that breath hold and you tense your body up a little bit, you're downloading loads of energy. So it's just like dumping out all the negative stuff and bringing in all the positive or the clean golden energy. But we'll talk more about the energy body in just a second, and you can relate it back to this conversation. Okay, so the Aya Healing Pyramid is like a waterfall or a cascade. So what you put in the top of a waterfall or a cascade tends to find its way down through the cascade, doesn't it? Think of the Aya Healing Pyramid a little bit like that. So the Aya Healing Pyramid has got three sides to it: blue side, green side, yellow side. So let's look at the side one to start with, the blue side. These are the names of the layers. So what we've done is with the Aya Healing Pyramid is that we have separated out the human system of health and well-being into 5 different layers. Now, of course, the human system is not separated in reality. It's just one integrated functioning system. But to understand it, we need to separate things out and label them to actually understand what's going on, because then we can have some sort of level of control over things. If we don't understand things, we can't have any control over it. And, part of self-healing is about taking control over our own bodies and over our own system of health and well-being. So these are the layers of the human system. So the material body layer, that is this material, physical body. Most people would call that the physical body. We call it the material body because it's made of matter. And matter is a type of energy. It's material energy. That is atoms and molecules. The material body is what quite a lot of our modern healthcare systems is based around. Now that is changing. That has changed recently, and it is changing. But historically speaking, it's mostly our healthcare systems are mostly about the material body. Now the next layer up is the bioenergy layer. The bioenergy layer is very important for health and well-being, and that has been known for thousands of years culturally. It's been known in many ancient systems of healing and medicine. The bioenergy layer, you may recognize words like chi or prana or life force or subtle energy. The bioenergy layer refers to the flows of energy which flows around the body, which flows around and sustains the body. It's produced by the body. Now, these days, in the modern world, we can actually rename what this type of energy is, because this type of energy is actually magnetic fields. So it's different types of magnetic fields which are produced by the body and which flow around the body and sustain the body. Now, the bioenergy layer is part of many alternative and complementary medicines, and it's been in human culture for thousands of years, but it's not yet part of mainstream science. Now that is changing a little bit as well. There are parts of science which are trying to find this bioenergy that's been known about for so long intuitively. But at the moment, it's still not part of mainstream science. However, it shouldn't be discounted because it is so important to health and well-being, and we'll talk a lot about the bioenergy layer and the energy body as part of this course. So the emotional layer is next. That is our emotions, of course. That's what make us feel good or bad. And understanding the emotional cycle and what fuels the emotional cycle is clearly super important for health and well-being. If we want to alter our well-being, i.e. increase our well-being, that's the whole point, isn't it? We all want to feel better, don't we? We all want to feel well-being. So understanding our emotional cycle and what fuels our emotional cycle is important for that. The next layer up is the psychological layer. That includes everything within our personality structure. That includes our memories, our personality characteristics, our values, even our psychological identity. All that's within the psychological layer. And then we get to the spiritual layer. The spiritual layer is at the top of the pyramid. Now, remember what I said about the cascading effect of the pyramid. That means that what you put in the top cascades down through all the different layers. And the spiritual layer is at the top, so it can affect all of the other layers. If you get the top right, everything tends to cascade nicely into place. If you get the top wrong, everything tends to cascade out of place, out of balance. So what do we mean by the spiritual layer? What do we mean by that word spiritual? Because the word spiritual is a very loaded word, isn't it? It can mean all sorts of different things to different people. So we have to be very clear about what we mean by the word spiritual. I'm going to talk about it more in a second, but in basic terms, what we mean is that there is a silent inner peace inside everyone just waiting to be found. When we reduce all the contents of the mind and the emotions, all that turbulence that we feel on a day-to-day basis, when we reduce all that and look what's behind it, what we see is inner peace. And then when we focus on it, when we try and sit in it, we find that it's coming from our own awareness. It's coming from our own consciousness. So we'll talk about that in just a second though. So that's the spiritual layer. Right then, let's move on to side 2. I'm going to go through this pretty briefly because we're going to talk about it through this lesson. Side 2 is the self-healing exercises that we apply to each layer. So we separate the human system into these 5 layers, and we apply different self-healing exercises to each one of those layers to keep each layer healthy. And that's what this course is about, teaching these self-healing exercises. I won't go through that in detail now, though. But each lesson of this course is a lesson on each one of those layers. And side 3. Side 3 is the results of self-healing. Or if you're starting out a self-healing journey, you could say the goals of self-healing. This is what we can expect on the way. This is what we can expect to happen throughout our journey of self-healing. And at the end of this lesson, I'll go through this and show the cascading effect down the pyramid. So that's the Aya Healing Pyramid. That's the 3 sides of the Aya Healing Pyramid. Okay, I'm going to go through it in a little bit more detail now. Anyone got any questions so far? So let's start at the top then, the spiritual layer. So to describe the spiritual layer, we actually first have to talk about this little thing, the mask, or the mask identity, or the me mask, as the kids like to call it in our children's education program. So the mask itself is actually part of the psychological layer. But to understand the spiritual layer, we have to talk about the mask, because the spiritual layer is all about identity. So what is the mask? Well, the mask is the human identity that you think you are. It's been called many different names in the past. Some people call it the psychological self. Some people call it the false self. Some people call it the ego, or the egoic identity. Some people call it the little self. But either way, it is this mask. It is this mask that we walk around with to interact with other people. It's a social thing, really. It's a social construct. But it's the whole identity of who we think we are. So my question here is, who are you? Who are you exactly? If I asked you that question, just to try and imagine the answers that you might come up with. Now, when you ask that question to people, most of the time, the kind of answers you get back are things like, okay, well, they'll start with their name. Okay, I am such and such. And you're not happy. You want more than that. Okay, who are you? And then people will start to describe their personality, their likes and dislikes. Maybe they will describe their race or their gender, or maybe even a religion or nationality. All of that is part of the mask. All of that is part of the psychological identity, because it all comes from our memories. So who are you? Are you this mask in the personality which actually changes? Have you noticed that the personality changes through the years? The person or the personality that somebody is at the start of their life is vastly different from the personality at the end of their lives. It goes up and down all the way through the course of somebody's life, constantly changing, constantly dependent on what's going on around them or what other people think of them. You know, this is an ever-changing, volatile psychological structure which happens in the brain and the mind, the lower mind. Now I'll ask you again, who are you? Are you this mask? Are you this ever-changing, impermanent psychological structure? Or is there something deeper to you? Is there something more fundamental to you, to who you are? That's what the spiritual layer is all about. So what we're saying here is that there is something permanent within you. You are the light of awareness behind the mask. Now, when we go through our lives, generally speaking, we just have this seamless experience of life, don't we? We just automatically run through or walk through our lives, having experiences, building memories. We generally don't look inside that much to see what's going on. But actually, when you do look inside, it's called introspection, when you do look inside and see what's going on, you can actually separate your mind from you. You can separate your mind from your awareness. Now think about this. What did it feel like to be you at the start of your life? And what does it feel like to be you now? And I'm talking about in the present moment. I'm not talking about any psychological structure or anything. What does it actually feel like? The feeling of being you. I would guess that it's exactly the same. And it's only the personality that has changed in between. There is a part of you which has not changed all the way through the course of your life. That is your awareness. That is the consciousness behind the mind. It's what's looking out of your eyes right now at the computer screen. So that's the spiritual layer, because when you find that or realize that through meditation techniques, what you find is that it's actually made of inner peace. Inner peace is coming from that awareness. And generally speaking, we don't, or people do not notice it because of all the cloudiness and mugginess going on in the mind. All those emotions, all that turbulence, all those thoughts, all day long, thought patterns, again and again and again, tormenting us. The voice in the head, some people call it, and all the emotions. That clouds what is going on underneath. Because what is going on underneath, which is there in everybody, just waiting to be found, is pure and peaceful awareness. The silent inner peace of our own awareness. And that's the spiritual layer. Now, if we go to side 2 of the pyramid, the self-healing techniques designed to keep the spiritual layer healthy, or we could say here now, designed to make you realize the spiritual layer, is the journey of meditation. Now, the journey of meditation, we'll go through that in the spiritual layer lesson, but there's lots of different types of meditation that can give you access to the spiritual layer. Okay, that's the spiritual layer. Any questions before I move on? All right, and so let's go to the psychological layer. So what do we mean by the psychological layer? Right. So the best way to describe this is to use the analogy of a house. So this house, in the brickwork, you could say that that is unconscious, and in the roof area, that is conscious. You're aware of what's going on in there. But this house is an analogy, of course. But your mind is your house. Let's call your mind your house. But you are not your mind. We've talked about that in the spiritual layer. You are the awareness in the mind. So it's the same with your house. You are not your house, are you? It's just where you live. It's where you dwell. That's the analogy. So we go about our lives making these memories. We have experiences every day of our lives, and these memories get laid down in our subconscious, because everything in the brickwork is subconscious on this diagram. So these memories are just slapped together, to be honest with you. They're laid down in a very random, haphazard way. There's not much control there. It's just a natural process, of course. There's not much control. Your conscious control, that is. But out of these stack of memories, we get a personality. Out of all our experiences, just out pops this personality with personality characteristics and a set of values. We prioritize things and we value certain things over other things. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because out of this personality comes conscious thoughts, things we're aware of, our mind stream. All day long, have you ever noticed that all day long there are thoughts going through your mind? Now, some people notice this and some people don't notice this. Some people call it the voice in the head. Some people, we call it the mind stream. But constantly, a stream of thoughts all day long. Now, they are conscious because you are aware of those thoughts. And it's always happening in the present moment, isn't it? It's always now. Now, the interesting thing here is that those thoughts influence how the memories are laid down. And we'll talk about this more when we go into the psychological layer. But it's in the present moment that those memories are actually laid down. And it's your thoughts and emotions which influence how they are laid down. So we've got this cycle going on, that our personality is created from our conscious experiences. The personality is creating the mind stream, but the mind stream is influencing how those memories are laid down in the first place. For example, if you're extremely angry when you're making a memory, that gets laid down in a particular way. If you're very peaceful when you're making a memory, that gets laid down in a particular way. And all our afflictions in the mind all come from this stack of memories. Anxiety, for example, comes from somewhere. It comes from past experiences. So if we are always anxious, our memories are going to be constantly laid down, and it's going to cause anxiety in the future. So you've got this cycle going on, and it's the mind stream which influences those memories, how they're laid down. And all this is just happening to us with no control, which is why side 2 of the pyramid for the psychological layer is a category of self-healing exercises broadly named awareness of the mind stream. Because where in that analogy can you have any level of control? In the subconscious bit, you can't see it happening. You're not conscious of it. So it's got to be in the conscious bit. And the mind stream is always happening in the present moment, isn't it? So the only effect that you can possibly have is in the present moment. And we start by having awareness of what is going through our minds. What goes through our minds influences everything else in our psychological layer. So that's where we start with the self-healing exercises. And there's various self-healing exercises that we teach as part of this course. But generally speaking, that's the first step. Become aware of your thoughts. Are they negative? Are they positive? Are they neutral? What percentage, day to day, would you say, of negative versus positive thoughts? You know, spend the next week or so analyzing your thoughts and classifying them. Was that negative or was that positive? What percentage of my day am I locked in negative thinking versus positive thinking? It's a good exercise to try. So that's the psychological layer in a nutshell. Any questions before I move on to the emotional layer? Right then, the emotional layer. Like I said, obviously that's our emotions. But there is a lot to unpack with our emotions. So first of all, here are some examples of emotions. I don't need to tell you what emotions are, but you can broadly categorize emotions as positive and negative. And understanding how these emotions actually come about will give us a level of control over increasing the positive and decreasing the negative. Because clearly that's what we want to do in self-healing. We want to increase our well-being, don't we? Which means slowly decreasing the negative emotions we feel and slowly increasing the positive ones that we feel. So let's talk about the emotional cycle, what causes our emotions. Now, it's quite a lot to the emotional cycle, so we're just going to give it a broad outline here. But we always start with the most basic. In the most basic terms, the emotional cycle can be thought of as two components, thoughts and emotions. Now, have you ever noticed that when you feel a negative emotion, it's always come about because of a thought pattern? You start thinking about something, and then that kicks off the emotion in the body. You feel the emotion in the body as a fizzing negative feeling somewhere in the body. And then that negative feeling in the body kicks off more of the thinking. And you go round and round. You think more about that particular trigger, and then that kicks off more of the emotion in the body. We just keep going round and round. And you can get locked in that emotional cycle. You can get locked in it for minutes, hours, days. Some people get locked in it for a whole lifetime. And that can cause a huge amount of damage in the human system. So let's look at the emotional cycle in a little bit more detail now. So we've expanded to what I've just said here. So normally, it starts with a trigger, which is usually outside of the body. So everything in the blue square here is inside your body. And the trigger is most of the time coming from outside your body. Now, sometimes you have some control over the trigger, but quite often you don't have any control over the trigger. This could be something in the workplace. This could be something in family life. This could be something anywhere around you that triggers you. Sometimes you just don't have any control over that. But there is so much that you can control inside of you. Now that trigger kicks off thinking. You start thinking about the trigger. That releases emotional energy. Now this is the emotional energy that we were talking about earlier that gets stuck in the energy body. Now that emotional energy, that gets released by thinking, that goes around the energy body and that activates one of the emotion chakras. The emotion chakras, I'll talk about chakras a little bit more in a minute, but they are energy centers, and there's hundreds of chakras around the body. They all have different specialized roles, but there are 5 which are emotion chakras, emotion regulating chakras. Now that emotional energy activates one of those emotion chakras. That activates the emotional response in the material body. That involves the limbic system, the endocrine system. I'll talk about that later on. But that emotional response is that fizzing that you feel in the material body. And then that kicks off more of the thinking. And you go round and round. Emotional energy, emotion chakras, emotion in the body, thinking. Now, one thing to mention here is the idea of repression. Now, repression is a very well-known term already in psychology and psychotherapy. Repression is bottling up emotions. Repression is not allowing yourself to feel emotions, bottling them up, not allowing them to come out. And you can always tell when somebody is repressing their emotions because they refuse to talk about it, refuse to even feel it, refuse to even consider that they are having emotions. It's like running away from your emotions. Distract yourself, anything to distract yourself. Refuse to feel it. What's happening here is that emotional energy is getting blocked up. That is what causes blockages for the most part. So those emotion chakras get blocked up with that emotional energy. And not allowing yourself to feel it makes that blockage bigger and bigger and bigger. And this can cause all sorts of problems. And we'll talk about it more in the emotional layer lesson, but it can cause health problems. It can cause emotional imbalances in the personality. So it's very important to understand and remove those blockages where we can. That's why breath work is so good. Now, there is a fuel to this emotional cycle, and understanding the fuel is the key to quite a lot in self-healing. Now, we're going to talk about the fuel later on, of course, in the right lesson. But that fuel is karma. Karma, or we like to call it karma emotion, because karma is emotional memory. Now, karma is another loaded word that exists in loads of different spiritual philosophies and traditions and religions. And there's a lot of misunderstandings about karma. We're presenting karma as part of this lesson, or as part of this course, in a biological manner. It is a type of emotional memory, and it's going to be part of many of our research projects as well in our research department. But if this emotional cycle has a fuel, we can call it an emotion engine. And we call it the karma emotion engine. But that's enough about karma for now. We'll be talking about that a lot later on. So, side 2 of the pyramid, we are on karma emotion work. Now, there's lots of different exercises in karma emotion work, but one of the most important is called emotional meditation. And I won't explain that now, but it's a specific type of meditation which allows us to control the emotional reactions within us, stop producing more karma emotion, and stop us repressing emotions and causing blockages. Okay, time for a bit more breath work. It's enough talking for a minute. So let's do basic yogic breathing again, because it takes a bit of time for this to actually become automatic. Sometimes when you first do breath work, it can be a little bit difficult because you're trying to concentrate on your getting the technique right, but you're also trying to count, and it's also sometimes a bit counterintuitive for your belly to come out, because you normally think of breathing as breathing in. Well, actually, it's the opposite. The belly's got to come out, so it takes a little bit of practice. So let's do a little bit more of that. Oh, yes, let's have a break. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. We do tend to have a couple of minutes break in the middle of each lesson. Usually we do that about 11 o'clock. So let's just have a quick break and come back in a second. Thank you, Veronica. How are we getting on? Blimey, we're good at timing the breaks. Right, let's crack on then. Right then, so we are going to do some more basic yogic breathing. So just a quick reminder, just do a couple of breaths for you to remind you. Belly comes out, chest comes out. Roll up to the top, hold your breath, and then slow, steady stream all the way to the bottom of the breath. Try and force as much air out of your lungs as completely possible, really empty. Hold your breath again, 2 or 3 counts, and that's it, repeat. Okay, give that a go. And again, I'll let you know when to stop. Okay, that'll do. Okay, if you can integrate that into your daily routine somewhere, then you'll find immense benefit fairly quickly. Veronica, do you think you could turn your mic off? Thanks. Yeah, so if you can integrate that into your daily routine, you'll find immense benefit. You'll find immense benefit in the short term, but also the growing benefit over the long term, because self-healing really has a massive impact over the long term. So over the next month or so, if you could try and integrate basic yogic breathing into your daily routine, that would be fantastic. And you can do it in the morning if you like. You can do it in the evening if you prefer. You can do it throughout the day. It doesn't really matter. You can even just do it periodically through the day whenever you remember, whatever is best for you, basically. And that will set you up nicely for the next exercise, which we'll teach next month, which is called Golden Energy Yogic Breathing. Any questions about that? Any comments about the breathing there? Right, so let's crack on with the pyramid then. So we've talked about the spiritual layer, we've talked about the psychological layer, we've talked about the emotional layer. Now we're down to the bioenergy layer. So what does this mean? Well, the bioenergy layer has been part of many ancient systems of healing and medicine for thousands of years, and it still is, which quite often is now called complementary or alternative medicine. And a very good example here is Chinese medicine, all the different forms of Chinese medicine. If you've ever gone for acupuncture, for example, acupuncture or acupressure, and there's lots of different forms of it, but that relies on parts of the bioenergy layer. Now, as you can see in this slide here, there's lots of different diagrams here. Now, let's take the one on the left there. You can see the material body there underneath, and you can see the energy body around the outside of it. The energy body is a full body framework made of subtle energy or magnetic fields. Now, magnetic fields are fairly well known in science, and things like the aura. Now, you've probably heard of the word aura. The aura is an emanation of magnetic field from the material body. It's an electromagnetic field, which is perfectly acceptable to mainstream science. That's not what we're talking about here with the energy body. What we're talking about with these certain anatomical looking structures of the energy body, what we're talking about is the idea that magnetic fields can actually hold structures to them. So our material body can hold structures, obviously, but that's made of energy. If you look deep into the material body, it's made of atoms. If you look deeper into what an atom is, you'll eventually find that it's made of energy. That's a particular type of energy. And the material body has systems and organs in it. It's got a heart and a circulation system. It's got a skeletal system. It's got a renal system. It's got all sorts of these structures. Now, what we're saying here is that magnetic fields can also hold structures to them. So they can also form systems and organs. This is not yet part of mainstream science, of course. I need to mention that. I need to keep saying that so that we understand what is accepted mainstream healthcare, medicine and science, and what is alternative or complementary medicine, which is more part of cultural medicine, you could say, over thousands of years. They will come together eventually. It's just that science hasn't yet found evidence for these types of magnetic fields. So magnetic fields can hold structures, and you may have heard of the word chakra, and I've mentioned it a couple of times already. You may have heard of the word meridian system. So a chakra is an energy pump in the energy body. It pumps energy around the energy body, and there's hundreds of chakras around the body. They tend to all have different specialized roles, and I've talked about the emotion chakras already in this lesson, the 5 emotion chakras. But there's lots of different chakras, different types of chakras. And the meridian systems are vessels in the energy body. So the diagram on the right there, where you can see all these vessels going around, is also in the diagram on the left. These are meridians, and these are energy vessels that carry subtle energy or magnetic flux, you could call it, if you want to use a scientific term. But they carry this magnetic energy around the body. And in acupuncture and acupressure, they're actually using these maps of meridians to actually target certain areas. And you can actually download, if you go and Google maps of meridians in acupuncture. They've actually got all sorts of detailed maps that have been drawn over hundreds and hundreds of years. So why is the energy body in particular so important for self-healing? Well, back to the idea of these chakras. There's two aspects of the energy body that we make part of this course, and that is the chakra system and the meridian system. Now, the reason why the chakras are so important is because they regulate emotions. Those particular 5 chakras, and don't worry, we'll name them and talk about them later on, but there's 5 chakras which sit along the spinal column there, and you can see them on the left in different colors. You see them as colors when you train yourself to see chakras, and you can. You see them as different colors because they are different frequencies of energy. Now, those 5 emotion chakras, the red, orange, yellow, green, and blue, they are the emotion chakras. So that is the root chakra, the sacral, the solar plexus, the heart, and the throat. Don't worry about that. We'll talk about that later on. But they regulate our emotions. And on the right, you can see a picture of blocked chakras. That is blocked with emotional energy. So whenever we are feeling negative emotions, we're producing this negative emotional energy. It's just part of the emotional cycle, as we discussed before. But the problem is that it can go wrong. Because the material body can go wrong, doesn't it? You know, we can get ill health. That's the material body going wrong. Well, it's the same thing with the energy body. That can go wrong as well. And blockages in chakras is a very good example of that. When there's too much emotional energy, it gets blocked up. And repression, of course, causes those blockages as well. And when you look at somebody with blocked chakras, that's what it looks like. And that can cause all sorts of problems. That can cause a complete imbalance in the personality and also cause massive emotional reactions, because a blocked chakra is like a grenade and it inflates emotional reactions, makes everything 3 times as bad. And also over the long term, it can actually cause ill health in the material body as well. So it's very important to understand and take control of our energy body. So that's chakras. The second system, this slide here is just to show the imbalance. Should have moved to that earlier. But you can see the chakras on the left are clean and clear chakras. They have no blockages, therefore they are functioning correctly and regulating our emotions correctly. And on the right, they are imbalanced and not functioning correctly, therefore the personality goes a little bit imbalanced and haywire. And this is a pretty natural state of being for most people, to be honest with you, to have blocked chakras. I would say 95% of people out there will have blockages in their chakras. It's perfectly normal and natural. But there's so much that they could do to help themselves to unblock those chakras and stabilize their personality and stabilize their emotions. In fact, you might have heard the term balancing chakras. That's a popular term out there and in well-being circles. Well, actually, you're not actually balancing the chakra when you're doing that. What you're doing is you're cleaning the chakra, and in doing so, the chakra regulates emotions correctly, and therefore the emotions balance. That's what's actually happening. That's the term balancing chakras. You're not balancing chakras, you're balancing emotions. Now, the second system in the energy body that we talk about in this course, and of course there are loads of systems in the energy body. There's the Kundalini system, there's the karmic system, there's the free flow system, there's all sorts of systems. But there's 2 that we focus on in this course because they're the 2 most important for self-healing. That's the chakra system and the meridian system. And this is a system of energy vessels. Now, one particular term for subtle energy, which has been around for a long time, is called life force. You might have heard of that word, life force energy. Now, these kind of phrases come through human intuition over the centuries, don't they? Now, there is a reason why. There's a grain of truth under there why it's called life force energy. Because our bodies need a supply of this energy to live. And we'll talk about that later on in a later lesson. But the meridian system is delivering that energy to the body. It comes in through our chakras, and then it gets delivered into the body through the meridian system. So the meridian system is a little bit like veins and arteries of the material body, which is delivering things to the body through the blood. So blockages can actually happen in the meridian system as well. It's an overflow from chakras. So that emotional energy can actually get blocked up in the meridian system. A very good example or symptoms of blockages in the meridian system are things like fibromyalgia, pain. Fibromyalgia is a growing problem, and science doesn't 100% understand how or why it happens. They understand, they know that there's an emotional root to it of some kind, but they're not 100% sure why. So it's pretty clear to us, because we get a lot of these cases, it's pretty clear to us that it's caused by blockages in the meridian system. When it all backs up in the meridian system, it causes inflammation and irritation in the nervous system and the material body. It also shifts around the body as well, so you can always tell if it's fibromyalgia, because one day your arm and shoulder will be hurting, and the next day it's down by your hips. And that's because the energy is just slowly shifting around the meridian system. It's just all blocked up. And it will also cause chronic fatigue eventually as well. So many chronic fatigue aspects of many illnesses, we think, come from a blocked meridian system as well, because you need that energy coming into your body. Okay, so side 2 for the bioenergy layer is energy breathwork. And there's 3 particular breathing exercises that we teach as part of this course. Out of all the hundreds of breathing exercises, we've distilled it down to 3 most important ones, which keep a decent amount of simplicity, but are pretty much the most powerful. You can't get much more efficient or powerful than the ones that we teach in this course. But we've talked about basic yogic breathing. Next month, we will introduce you to the next one. All right, that's the bioenergy layer. Any questions before I move on? Okay, the material body layer is next. So the material body layer, that's the material physical body, the one that everybody knows so well. And the reason why everyone knows it so well is because we can see it, touch it, feel it. And quite often, it's the first place that we see symptoms of ill health. Quite often, people will not worry about or not think about health and well-being until something goes wrong in the material body. And that's when we go to the doctors or the hospital. But the problem is that look where it is on the pyramid. It's at the bottom of the pyramid. It's the bottom layer of the pyramid. That means that it's got the weight of all these layers on top of it. Remember the cascading effect of health and well-being down the pyramid. So the material body's got the weight of all those layers bearing down on top of it. So a problem in the material body may have been manifesting or festering for a long period of time before you actually see symptoms in the material body, which is another reason why we need to attend to all of the layers of the pyramid at all times to give ourselves the best possible chance of healthy material body. So what are the factors that affect the health of the material body? Because we can bring it down to a few different factors. The first is genetics, of course. We'll talk a bit about genetics later on, but genetics is the code, the DNA code in every cell of our body, which is like a language, which is like a blueprint for the material body, and it's what builds our material body. It's also what constantly regulates our material body all the way through our lives. Now, generally speaking, we're born with a set of genetics, and it was traditionally thought that we can't really change those genetics, but actually, what science does now recognize, and this is part of mainstream science, what science now recognizes is that our genetics change all the way through the course of our lives, slightly. Genes can get switched on and off throughout the course of our lives. It's called epigenetics. It's a new field of study, 10 to 20 years old or so. So anyway, epigenetics can actually change our genetics, and things like emotional state can affect our genetics. Like stress can affect our genetics. Things that happen to us in our lives can actually affect our genetics. And that can actually get passed on to our offspring. That's what epigenetics is all about. We'll talk about that later on, though. So genetics can affect the health of the material body, of course. You can be born with a genetic condition, for example. Our environment can affect the health of the material body. And I don't mean nature, I'm talking about our surroundings, our immediate environment, where we live, what we do in our lives, where we go, our profession, the area that we live in, where we put ourselves. So that can clearly have an effect on the health of our material body. And another category is self-care. One of the most important, you could say, because this is one of the only ones that you can actually have some control over. Now, you can have a tiny bit of control over your genetics, like I've just explained, but only a tiny little bit. You can control your environment to some degree, but some people can't necessarily choose where they are or choose their environment. Some people don't have a choice. Self-care is 100% your choice. You can choose to look after yourself, or you can choose to not look after yourself. That's why it's so important. And of course, that's what this course is all about. And the last one is karma. Karma can affect the health of the material body. And the way it does it is through the layers of the pyramid with emotions and the bioenergy layer, but we'll talk more about that in the emotional layer. But those are the things that, broadly speaking, can affect the health of the material. And side 2 of the pyramid for the material body layer is, not surprisingly, nutrition and physical exercise. And I say not surprisingly because there is plenty of information about that online already. So I'm not a nutritionist myself. So this course, we do have nutritionists as part of AYA, by the way. So if anyone wants personal nutrition advice, we do have plenty of nutritionists, actually. However, it's not part of this course to be teaching in-depth stuff about nutrition and physical exercise. What we're going to do is we're going to look at it from a slightly different perspective and hopefully bring up some things that you might not have thought of, because there's plenty of information out there about nutrition and physical exercise. All right, any questions before I move on? Okay, so lastly, let's talk about side 3 of the pyramid. Side 3 is the results of self-healing, if you remember. Side 3 is also the goals of self-healing. It's what we can expect along the way of the journey of self-healing. So let's talk through these results, and let's talk about the cascading effect of health and well-being down the pyramid. So in the spiritual layer, if we go through the journey of meditation and we find the spiritual layer, or we realize the awareness behind the mind, which is made of inner peace, and we spend as much time as possible in that inner peace, we will eventually find peace and unity in the spiritual layer inside of us. Now, it's not immediately, it's a growing thing. It's a very slow growth, that silent inner peace. And actually, you can actually measure your progress sometimes in your spiritual development. You can actually measure your progress sometimes as to how much inner peace that you feel inside. But if we find that in the spiritual layer, then that has a massive impact on the psychological layer, because the more time we spend in peaceful awareness, the less time we spend in damaging psychological, negative, repetitive thought patterns. So the more time we spend in the spiritual layer, the more it smooths out the psychological layer. And at the same time, we are working on the psychological layer with self-healing exercises, awareness of the mind stream exercises, which gives us healthy values rather than unhealthy values in the psychological layer. And then that has a massive impact on the emotional layer. Because if we have healthy values, we're choosing our values, we end up feeling more positive karma emotions. Remember, karma is just emotional memory. We feel more positive emotions rather than negative ones, or less negative ones, as we go through the journey. And at the same time, we're working on the emotional layer with karma emotion work. So then that has a massive impact on the bioenergy layer, because the more positive emotions we feel, the more, or let's say the less negative emotions we feel, the less blockages we're going to have in the bioenergy layer. So we'll have cleaner and more balanced emotions, cleaner chakras, and more balanced emotion chakras. And at the same time, we're working on the bioenergy layer with energy breath work to remove blockages. And so that has a massive impact on the health of the material body, because the less blockages we have in the energy body, the more chance we give ourselves of having a healthy material body, because blockages causes ill health in the material body over time. And we'll talk about that later on. But at the same time, we are doing self-healing exercises, nutrition and exercise. We're applying nutrition and exercise, which again impacts the health of the material body, gives us the best chance possible of having a healthy material body. So there we are. That is the Aya Healing Pyramid. And this is just to show you that it is actually a three-dimensional structure. It's a tetrahedron, and it's got one of the sides, it's got information on three sides, side 1, 2, and 3. Side 1 is the blue side, the names of the layers. And side 2 is the self-healing exercises that we apply to each one of those layers. And then side 3, the results of self-healing. So Karma Emotion Work is a group of exercises. The most important one is emotional meditation, which we'll teach you in the emotional layer lesson. But emotional meditation allows you to not repress emotions, and also allows you to cut the emotional cycle in half when you're having an emotional reaction. And it also allows you to not produce any more karma. So that's probably the most important one of the of karma emotion work. And there's some other emotional management techniques in there, and karma emotion techniques. But emotional meditation is the most, absolutely. Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem. So karma has got some, is a loaded word, and it's got some myths about it surrounding that word. And most people, when you think of karma, you think of judgment and punishment. You think, oh, I must have been bad, so I've been given a bad experience, or I'm suffering because I've been bad in a previous life, or something like that. So you know, as part of this course, we want to dispel those myths, because what we're saying here is that it's just emotional memory. There are grains of truth to all these spiritual myths, and the grain of truth is that karma is emotional memory. It's just, there's no higher power which is judging and dishing out punishment. It's just a sequence of cause and effect. So I'll give you an example as a basic type of karma. Fear is a type of karma. Now, if we feel fear in a particular situation, and then we worry about that fear constantly, we are programming our mind to feel fear in the future. That is karma. So the more we worry about something, the more we are giving ourselves that worry in the future. We're going to constantly keep worrying about it, because you're programming your own mind to keep worrying about that particular fear. So that's basically what karma is, emotional memory. And it goes back many previous lives as well. So we're talking about reincarnation now, which we'll talk about reincarnation in a future lesson. But karma is the emotional transport system which takes emotional memory from one life and then transfers it to the next life. That's why it's linked to reincarnation. It's emotional memory from past lives. So, for example, I had a public speaking phobia in this life. That came from a previous life, experiences in a previous life. So emotional memory not only gets dragged through as emotional baggage in this incarnation, but there's a whole load of previous incarnations that we have emotional memory from as well. So it's not about punishment, it's not about judgment, it's about that emotional baggage that we carry on, that we just have to let go of quite often. Okay, any more questions? Quick note about Google Classroom before we'll have enough time for a discussion and also a meditation as well. But Google Classroom is our online platform. So we're going to upload the video of the lesson, we'll upload the course notes, and there's a chat group on there. If anyone's got any questions, we can share or have a discussion in between lessons as well. So if anyone's not on there, we just need to send you an invite. You'll need a Gmail account to get on there, I think. But we just need to send you an invite, and then you can just log on, and it's very easy. So if you're not on Google Classroom yet, if you wouldn't mind sending Veronica a note, and she can enroll you into Google Classroom, if that's right, Veronica. Great. Okay. Yeah, well, I think you've hit the nail right on the head when it comes to the mask, and yes, it absolutely can, and but it depends how you approach life. It depends how you tackle life. It depends how people react to the things that happen to them, and this is going back to that analogy of the house, of how our mind stream impacts how those memories are laid down. If something negative happens to somebody and they react negatively, they are perpetuating the cycle of negativity. If they try and keep centered and positive, then they are reacting in a positive way, even though the thing is negative that's happening. You can actually react in a positive way. That changes your psychology. That actually changes the memory system. So you're influencing how your memories are laid down. So people can either spiral into a negative cycle, and then they get reinforced. It's negative reinforcement. Then, when negative things happen to people, then it will reinforce their negative worldview, and it will spiral into negativity. Or you can spiral, if you're careful and you're aware, you can spiral into positivity instead, and try and react positively to everything that happens in your life. So yeah, absolutely, absolutely bang on. Yes. So repression is all about bottling up emotions. So there's various techniques that we can apply, and the biggest one is actually emotional meditation. So emotional meditation actually cuts the emotional cycle in half. So it does actually stop an emotional reaction in the present moment, but it also allows you to not repress those emotions. So you are allowing your emotions to flow during emotional meditation, but you're also cutting the cycle in half. It's basically meditating on your emotions, but we'll go through that in the emotional layer lesson. But the same thing, the same technique actually stops you from making calmer emotions, because we make calmer emotions through our thinking process. Think of it like that. You're fueling emotional memory by the thinking process in the mind. So that's why we should be so careful of what we're thinking from day to day, because there are consequences to our thoughts. We're programming our emotional system through that thought process, and that's what's producing calmer emotion, which then comes back to bite us, basically.